In 1893, the city of Chicago built a city. Not a neighborhood, not a district, an entire city. 250 acres, 200 buildings, 14 major structures the size of cathedrals, a canal system, a railway, a working harbor, a complete electrical grid that lit the entire complex at night with a brilliance that people who saw it described as supernatural. They called it the White City. 6 months after it opened, they burned it to the ground. That is the official story. The reason given is insurance fraud, an accidental fire that spread, administrative negligence. The reason nobody talks about is what those buildings actually were, what was running through their walls, why the men who built them refused to use standard construction materials, and why the photographs taken inside them in 1893 show something in the architecture that has no explanation in any engineering textbook written before or since. This is not a story about a World's Fair. This is a story about what free energy infrastructure looks like when it is built in public, in plain sight, documented by thousands of photographs, and then systematically destroyed before anyone understood what they were looking at. Start with the materials. The White City buildings were constructed using a mixture called staff, a combination of cement, plaster, and jute fiber. This is the official explanation. Temporary construction, cheap, disposable, built to last one season and no more. This explanation is repeated in every standard history of the 1893 exposition, and it is demonstrably, photographically, measurably false. The walls of the major White City structures were between 3 and 4 feet thick. 3 to 4 feet. The temporary exhibition halls of every other World's Fair built in the same era had walls between 8 and 14 inches. The standard thickness for a temporary structure designed to stand for 6 months. The White City walls were not temporary construction thickness. They were fortress construction thickness. They were cathedral construction thickness. The men who built them either vastly over-engineered a temporary structure for no reason, or the structures were not designed to be temporary. The building codes of 1893 did not require walls of that thickness for any purpose. Nobody mandated them. The architects, Daniel Burnham and his team, chose them. And when journalists asked why, the answer given was aesthetic. The thickness was necessary to support the ornamental facades. This answer satisfied people in 1893. It should not satisfy anyone who looks at the structural drawings, because the structural drawings show something the aesthetic explanation does not account for. Running through those 4-foot walls, embedded in the staff construction itself, is a network of hollow channels, not pipes, not conduits in any modern sense. Hollow spaces deliberately formed during construction, running vertically and horizontally through the interior of every major load-bearing wall in the complex. The channels connect at regular intervals to the roof structures and to something in the floors, something that was removed before the buildings were opened to the public, leaving sealed cavities that the construction workers who discovered them during the 1894 demolition described in their foreman's logs as unexpected voids, origin unknown. Origin unknown. In a building constructed less than 12 months earlier by a living architect with a documented construction team, the workers tearing it down found structural features whose origin was unknown. This phrase appears in the demolition foreman's log 3 separate times. 3 separate buildings, 3 separate teams of workers, 3 times writing down that they found things inside the walls that nobody had told them to expect. Frederick Law Olmsted designed the landscape of the White City. He is best known for Central Park. What is less known is that Olmsted spent the final years of his life deeply troubled by the destruction of the exposition. He gave very few interviews in his later years. In one of them, published in a small Boston architectural journal in 1901, he said something that has been quoted occasionally, but never seriously examined. He said the grounds were designed to function as a unified system, that the buildings were not individual structures, but components of something larger, that the canal placement, the building orientations, the specific distances between structures were not aesthetic decisions. They were technical specifications. He said the man who understood the technical specifications best was not an architect. He did not name this man. The interview was his last public statement on the subject. He died the following year. The journal it was published in ceased operation in 1903. The original copy exists in one archive in Boston, filed under miscellaneous correspondence rather than under Olmsted's name, where it would be found by any researcher looking for his work. The man Olmsted did not name was almost certainly Nikola Tesla. Tesla designed the electrical system of the White City. This is documented and uncontested. The Westinghouse Corporation, using Tesla's alternating current technology, won the contract to light the exposition against Thomas Edison's direct current bid. The lighting of the White City was Tesla's first large-scale public demonstration of alternating current, and it was extraordinary. 90,000 incandescent bulbs. The entire complex illuminated at a brightness that had never been achieved anywhere in the world. People traveled from across the country simply to see the lights. What is not in the standard history is the nature of Tesla's involvement beyond the lighting contract. Tesla visited the White City construction site multiple times during the building phase, in 1892 and early 1893, before the electrical installation began. He had no documented reason to be there during structural construction. He was not an architect. He was not a materials engineer. He had no role in the wall construction or the foundation work. But he was there, signed into the construction site records on 4 separate occasions, meeting with Burnham's team, walking the buildings, looking at things inside the walls that were not yet complete. Tesla was not inspecting the lighting infrastructure. He was inspecting something that was being built before the lighting infrastructure was installed. Something in the walls. In 1899, 6 years after the White City burned, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs and conducted the experiments that produced the most extraordinary results of his career. He transmitted electrical energy through the ground and atmosphere without wires across distances of miles. He lit 200 bulbs simultaneously from a transmitter located 25 miles away. He claimed in his notes from this period that the experiments confirmed what he had suspected since 1893, that the Earth itself was a conductor and that the right receiver architecture could extract usable electrical energy from the atmospheric field continuously, without fuel, without combustion, without any ongoing input beyond the initial construction of the receiver. He called the atmospheric field the wheelwork of nature. He said it was inexhaustible. He said it had been used before, not could be used, had been used, past tense, by builders who understood something about receiver architecture that modern engineers had forgotten or been prevented from rediscovering. He was not speculating about a future technology. He was describing an existing one that had been demonstrated, one that had infrastructure already built, and one that had been systematically removed from that infrastructure in a coordinated effort he never fully described but repeatedly referenced in notebooks that were not available to the public until decades after his death. Now go back to Chicago. August 1893. The world's Columbian Exposition closes. 27 million people have visited. It is the most attended event in American history to that point. The buildings are scheduled for demolition, a process expected to take several months. On the night of July 5, 1894, fire breaks out in the casino building on the lakefront. Within hours, the fire has spread to the casino, the peristyle, the music hall, and the terminal station. By morning, 4 of the major structures are gone. The fire is ruled accidental, attributed to a watchman's fire that spread to a nearby haystack. This explanation is implausible on its face. The staff material used in White City construction was not flammable in the way the fire behavior required. Contemporary fire engineers noted that staff walls of that thickness should have slowed the fire dramatically. Instead, the fire moved through the complex as though something inside the walls was accelerating it. Something that burned hot, that burned completely, that left the copper fixtures and the interior channel systems in a state of destruction disproportionate to what a simple accidental fire should have produced. The copper was not just damaged, it was melted. Temperatures sufficient to melt copper are significantly higher than a structural fire produces under normal conditions. Something burned very hot inside those walls. Something that was apparently not supposed to be there if the buildings were simply temporary exposition structures built from plaster and jute fiber. The 6 buildings that survived the fire, the ones that were subsequently demolished in the standard way by the demolition crews who wrote the foreman's logs about unexpected interior voids, were in the section of the complex furthest from the initial fire. They were demolished over the following months. Their materials were sold as salvage. The copper, what remained of it, went to scrap dealers. The stone and masonry went to fill. The structural drawings and construction specifications were transferred to the City of Chicago archives, where they remained for decades in a condition described by a 1960s archivist as poorly organized and incomplete. Poorly organized and incomplete. For a construction project of this scale, documented in extraordinary photographic and journalistic detail during its construction, the original structural drawings are poorly organized and incomplete in the official archive. This is not how major civic construction projects are documented. This is how documentation looks when it has been selectively removed. What was the White City actually for? The most coherent answer is that it was a demonstration. Not a demonstration of American industrial achievement, though it was presented as that. A demonstration of something more specific. Tesla's alternating current electrical system needed a large-scale public proof of concept to defeat Edison's direct current lobby and win the commercial electrical contracts that would determine the energy infrastructure of the 20th century. The White City provided that proof of concept. But Tesla's ambitions went beyond alternating current. His notebooks from 1892 and 1893 describe a system he called the magnifying transmitter. An energy transmission architecture that would have made the alternating current grid unnecessary. Free energy, drawn from the atmospheric field, distributed through receiver buildings, available to everyone at no ongoing cost. The White City, with its extraordinary wall thickness, its hollow channel systems, its Tesla-designed electrical infrastructure, and its orientation specifications that Olmsted described as technical rather than aesthetic, may have been something much more significant than an exposition. It may have been the first large-scale public test of a free energy receiver network built into an entire city block complex. A test that succeeded well enough to terrify the men who had just invested everything in controlling the combustion energy supply. And a test that was ended, permanently and completely, on the night of July 5, 1894, by a fire that burned copper at temperatures a haystack cannot produce. J.P. Morgan attended the World's Columbian Exposition. He was there for the opening. He was there again in September. He met with exposition organizers. He was photographed in the White City. 9 years later, he pulled the funding for Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, the permanent free energy transmission station Tesla began building on Long Island in 1901. The reason Morgan gave, according to the standard history, was that there was no way to put a meter on it. That phrase is famous among Tesla researchers. No way to put a meter on it. No way to charge per unit of energy consumed. Free energy was not a technical problem for Morgan. It was a business problem. And the solution to that business problem was not to find a different funding model. It was to ensure that the infrastructure necessary to make free energy distribution possible did not get built. Or, in the case of what already existed, got burned. The White City is the most photographed demolished structure in American history. 27 million people saw it. Thousands of photographs were taken inside it. And none of those photographs clearly show the interior channel systems in the walls, because the channel systems were inside the walls, embedded in the construction, invisible from the surface. Invisible to every visitor. Visible only to the construction workers who built them, the demolition workers who found them, and the one man who visited during construction and understood what he was looking at. The man who had already seen the same architecture somewhere else. In the fireplaces of the old estates. In the copper chambers behind the sealed hearthstones. In the geometric schematics carved into marble surrounds across 12 countries. Tesla did not build the White City, but he recognized it. And that recognition, that single fact of recognition, is the thread that connects the fireplaces to the exposition, to the suppression to the world we live in now. A world that runs on metered, combustible, purchasable fuel. Not because free energy is impossible, because it was already built, and then it was taken away.